The divorce papers hit the coffee table at 11:47 p.m., like a slap Nadia had been expecting for years, but somehow never saw coming. Sign them, Ethan said, his voice carrying that particular brand of cruelty he'd perfected over 7 years of marriage. Or don't. I don't really care anymore. Nadia stared at the documents, her hands frozen in her lap. The apartment they'd shared, that he'd chosen, decorated, controlled, felt suffocatingly small suddenly. Every surface held a memory of her shrinking. The couch where he'd told her she was too sensitive when she cried about missing her mother's funeral because he'd needed her at his work event. The kitchen where he'd joked that she couldn't manage money, so he'd handle all their finances. The bedroom where affection had become transactional, conditional, rare. I want an open marriage, Ethan had said 3 hours ago, coming home smelling like someone else's perfume. Not asking, announcing. Nadia had stared at him, waiting for the punchline. He'd laughed. Actually laughed. Come on, Nadia. You're too boring for just one person anyway. This way, we both get what we want. What do I want? She'd whispered. I don't know. Does it matter? The truth of that question, the casual way he'd confirmed she'd been invisible to him for years, broke something in Nadia that had been cracking since the day she'd said, I do. She remembered fragments like shards of broken glass. Her 30th birthday, forgotten while he took clients to dinner. The promotion she'd earned, dismissed as cute, while he talked about his own career. Her best friend Maya's wedding, which he'd refused to attend, forcing Nadia to make excuses until Maya stopped calling. The bank account he'd insisted on controlling for efficiency, giving her an allowance like a child. The skills she'd once had, reading people, crafting strategies, closing deals, all dulled by years of being told she was too emotional or overthinking things. She'd been disappearing. One criticism, one control, one cruel joke at a time. At a time. Now staring at divorce papers that should have felt like liberation but somehow felt like confirmation of worthlessness, Nadia realized she had a choice. She could sign, beg, negotiate for scraps of dignity, or she could leave. At midnight exactly, Nadia stood. She picked up her phone, still in her name, the one thing he hadn't thought to control. She walked to the door in the jeans and sweater she was wearing. Where are you going? Ethan called from the couch, annoyed rather than concerned. Nadia didn't answer. She just walked out. The rain hit her the moment she stepped outside, cold and cleansing. She had no money. He controlled the accounts. No car. It was his. No friends left to call. He'd made sure of that. She had nothing. And somehow, standing in the pouring rain outside the Celestial Grand Hotel, watching wealthy strangers come and go, Nadia felt the first spark of something she hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Dangerous, terrifying, absolute freedom. What happens when you have nothing left to lose? You walk through doors you would never have opened before. Before we go further, hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt invisible in your own life, like you were disappearing one day at a time. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. New York? London? Tokyo? Because what happens to Nadia in the next 24 hours will absolutely blow your mind. And part 5? Part 5 changes everything you think you know about this story. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. 3 years earlier, Nadia Brooks had walked into Montgomery & Associates marketing with a portfolio that made the hiring manager lean forward with interest. She'd been 25, sharp, ambitious. She could read a client in 30 seconds, spot the insecurity they were hiding, the desire driving their decisions, the words that would make them say yes. It was a gift, that ability to see people. Her mother used to say Nadia had emotional X-ray vision. Ethan Brooks had been a mid-level manager at a tech startup when they met at an industry mixer. Handsome in a conventional way, confident in his compliments. He'd pursued her with intensity that felt like love, but was actually something else entirely. The control started small. That friend of yours, Marcus? He seems unprofessional. Maybe you shouldn't hang out with him so much. You spent how much on that dress? Baby, we need to be smarter with money. Let me handle our finances. I'm better with numbers. Why do you need to go to that conference? You're not even speaking. Seems like a waste. Stay home with me instead. Each request sounded reasonable in isolation. Each refusal made her seem unreasonable. So Nadia stopped refusing. Marcus stopped calling after she canceled on him 3 times. Her work friends drifted away when she stopped attending happy hours. Her boss stopped offering her lead projects when Ethan convinced her to scale back her hours to focus on their relationship. By year 2 of marriage, Nadia wasn't the woman who'd walked into that marketing firm. She was someone smaller, quieter, someone who asked permission to buy groceries and apologized for having opinions. Ethan's pattern became clear only in hindsight. He didn't want a partner. He wanted an audience, someone to reflect his importance back at him. The other women, and there had been others, she'd find evidence later, weren't about sex or love. They were about power, about having options while she had none. His mistress this time was a 23-year-old paralegal named Brittany who posted photos with Ethan on Instagram, tagging luxury restaurants Nadia had never been taken to. Young enough to be impressed by his leased BMW and middle management title. Too inexperienced to see the control tactics for what they were. Breaking Nadia wasn't collateral damage in Ethan's affairs. It was the point. Now, at 28, soaked to the bone and using the last 3% of her phone battery, Nadia pushed through the brass doors of the Celestial Grand Hotel. She had no plan, no money for a room. But the lobby was warm and dry, and she needed a moment to think. The hotel lounge gleamed with marble and gold fixtures. Beautiful people in expensive clothes sipped cocktails and conducted quiet business. Nadia felt like an intruder in her wet jeans and cheap sweater. "Can I help you, miss?" The bartender appeared, a kind-faced man in his 50s who looked at her with pity rather than judgment. "Just water, please." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "I can't pay right now, but on the house." He slid a glass across the polished bar with a gentle smile. "Rough night?" Nadia's laugh came out broken. "Rough 7 years." She ordered her hands to stop shaking. Refused to let tears fall. This was a public place. She would not be that woman, broken and crying in a luxury hotel bar while people stared. First moment of agency in years, she would not cry. The atmosphere in the lounge shifted suddenly, though Nadia was too lost in her own catastrophe to notice. Conversations grew quieter. Staff moved with sharper efficiency. Even the air seemed to change, charged with something electric and dangerous. In the corner booth, partially hidden by shadows and privacy, sat a man who made powerful people nervous. Kwon Jae-Seok was 29 and looked like he'd been carved from stone and danger. His tailored black suit cost more than most people's cars. His face was beautiful in a severe way. Sharp jaw, intense dark eyes that missed nothing, black hair styled with careless precision. 2 men flanked him, silent and still as statues, but radiating the kind of readiness that suggested violence was always an option. Staff didn't approach his table unless summoned. Other patrons didn't make eye contact. Everyone understood instinctively. This was a man you didn't bother unless you wanted consequences. Jae-Seok was reviewing contracts on a tablet, half listening to his lieutenant's whispered report about shipping schedules and territorial disputes, when movement at the bar caught his attention. A woman, soaked through, hands shaking around a water glass, eyes that had been crying but refused to cry now. She looked erased. That's what made him notice, not her beauty, though she was beautiful beneath the exhaustion. Not her obvious distress, though that was evident. It was the way she held herself, like someone who'd been systematically dismantled and was trying desperately to remember how to be whole. Jae-Seok knew that look. He'd worn it once at 17 after his father was murdered and his family's business was stolen. He'd been nothing then, erased, powerless, expected to disappear. He'd chosen differently. "Who is she?" he asked quietly. His lieutenant glanced over. "Nobody. Just some woman." Jae-Seok's eyes narrowed slightly. "Everyone is somebody. Find out." He returned to his contracts, but part of his attention remained on the woman at the bar who refused to cry, even though her world had clearly ended. Ethan Brooks had controlled through diminishment, making Nadia smaller until she barely existed. Kwon Jae-Seok had built power through observation, seeing everything, missing nothing, understanding that control and destruction were different things. One of these philosophies would save Nadia. The other had almost killed her. Nadia's hands were still shaking when she stood to leave the bar 20 minutes later. She'd finished her water, composed herself as much as possible. The bartender had been kind, but she couldn't impose further. She had no plan except to walk until exhaustion made decisions for her. She didn't see the corner booth, didn't notice the shift in atmosphere, didn't register the two men in expensive suits whose hands moved toward concealed weapons the moment her unsteady trajectory angled toward their table. The water glass slipped from her trembling fingers. It happened in slow motion, crystal tumbling through air, water arcing in a perfect stream, splashing across the polished table and onto the lap of a man who made dangerous people nervous. Nadia froze. The guards' hands disappeared inside their jackets. Then Kwon Jae-Seok raised one finger, just one, and the entire lounge held its breath. "I'm so sorry," Nadia whispered, mortification flooding through exhaustion. "I didn't see I'll pay for cleaning." "Sit." The word wasn't loud, but it carried absolute authority. Nadia's knees buckled, and she sank into the chair across from him more from shock than obedience. Up close, he was devastating. Sharp features that belonged on magazine covers, dark eyes that saw through every defense, an intensity that should have terrified her, but somehow didn't. "You look like someone who needs to breathe," Jae-Seok said, his English accented but perfect. He gestured to his guards, who stepped back, hands emerging empty. "I'm fine." The lie came automatically. "I should go." "Where?" One word. Simple, direct. It shattered her. Because Nadia had nowhere. No home that was hers. No friend she hadn't lost. No family close enough to burden. No money in accounts she could access. Nowhere at all in the entire city except the rain-soaked street. She must have shown it on her face, the absolute emptiness of her options, because something shifted in his expression. Not pity. Something more complicated. "I didn't mean to bother you," she managed. "You didn't. Sit. Tell me what happened." Nadia didn't know why she obeyed. Maybe because he didn't demand or manipulate. Maybe because she was too exhausted to maintain walls anymore. Maybe because a stranger's indifference felt safer than facing another person who knew her as Ethan's diminished wife. She told him everything. The open marriage proposal delivered like an insult. The years of control disguised as care. The finances she couldn't access. The friends he'd driven away. The slow, systematic erasure of the woman she'd been until she barely recognized herself. She didn't mention names. Didn't know who this man was. Didn't care. She just needed someone, anyone, to hear her. To confirm she was real, her pain was real. She wasn't crazy for feeling destroyed by something everyone else would dismiss as marriage problems. Jae-Seok listened without interrupting. He didn't check his phone, didn't glance away, didn't offer empty reassurances. He simply listened with an intensity that made her feel seen for the first time in years. When she finished, throat raw and hands still shaking, he was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Your husband doesn't want freedom. He wants permission to abuse you." The clarity of that statement hit Nadia like revelation. Not marriage problems, not communication issues, abuse, permission to continue hurting her while she smiled and accepted it. "The open marriage isn't about other women," Jae-Seok continued, his voice calm but certain. "It's about making you complicit in your own destruction. If you agree, he gets to hurt you with your consent. If you refuse, he gets to blame you for the marriage ending. Either way, you lose. That's the point." Tears burned behind Nadia's eyes, but she blinked them back. "I can't go back there." "You won't." He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. "You need a place to stay. I own this hotel. You'll have a room. No strings, no expectations, just a safe place to think." Every instinct screamed refusal. She didn't know this man, didn't know what he wanted, but she had literally nowhere else to go, and something in his directness, the absence of manipulation, made her want to trust him. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "Because someone once helped me when I had nothing. And because I'm curious." "About what?" His smile was slight, enigmatic. "What you actually are beneath what he tried to make you." An older woman appeared, efficient, professional, kind-eyed. "Miss Park will take you to a suite. Take what you need. Rest. We'll talk tomorrow if you want to." Nadia followed Miss Park to an elevator, then down a quiet hallway to a suite that cost more per night than Nadia used to make in a week. Luxury bedroom, marble bathroom, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city. Miss Park handed her a key card. "Mr. Kwon says you're to be comfortable. If you need anything, call the front desk. They'll take care of it." Alone finally, Nadia collapsed onto the bed and cried. But this time, beneath the grief and humiliation, she felt something new. Anger. Pure, clarifying rage at the years stolen, the self-erased, the life she could have had. Meanwhile, in the lounge, Jae-Seok's lieutenant approached cautiously. Why are we involving ourselves? She's nobody. Jae-Seok's eyes didn't leave his tablet. That's what they want her to believe. I'm curious what she actually is. He paused. And find out everything about the husband. Name, employer, finances, associates, everything. His interest wasn't romantic, it was strategic. But even he didn't fully understand why yet. The next morning, Nadia woke to find designer clothes in her size, a phone charger, breakfast on a covered tray, and a simple note in elegant handwriting. Take what you need, KJS. She still didn't know what those initials meant. Her phone buzzed. 17 missed calls from Ethan. The text started concerned, then angry, then threatening. He'd lost control of her, and narcissists couldn't tolerate that. 3 days in the suite, and Nadia began to feel human again. She ventured out on the second day, just to the hotel lobby at first, then the cafe, then finally onto the street. Each step felt like reclaiming territory. For the first time in years, no one tracked her location. No one questioned where she'd been. No one demanded explanations. Freedom tasted like coffee she chose herself and walks without destination. But she wasn't alone. She noticed them by the third day. Men in perfectly tailored black suits maintaining careful distance. At the cafe, near the boutiques, outside the hotel, never threatening, never approaching, just present. Protection or surveillance? She couldn't tell. Miss Park appeared daily with compliments of the house, meals perfectly suited to her tastes, toiletries she needed before asking, even books she'd once loved. The care felt genuine, not transactional. On the fourth day, Ethan showed up. Nadia was in her suite when Miss Park called. Your husband is in the lobby demanding to see you. Hotel security is managing the situation. She moved to the window. 17 floors down, she watched Ethan arguing with two men in black suits who weren't hotel security. They were Jae-Seok's. They escorted him out with firm politeness, and for the first time in 7 years, Nadia saw Ethan powerless. It felt dangerously good. That evening, Miss Park delivered an invitation. Mr. Kwon requests the pleasure of your company for dinner. You may decline, of course. Nadia accepted out of curiosity and something else, a pull toward the man who'd shown her more respect in one conversation than her husband had in 7 years. The private dining room was elegant but not ostentatious. Jae-Seok arrived without guards, dressed casually in black, looking less like a businessman and more like someone who simply existed in his own authority. You're recovering, he observed, pouring her wine. I'm trying to remember who I was before I disappeared. They talked for 2 hours. He asked about her, not her trauma, but her, what she'd loved about marketing, how she read people. What she wanted before Ethan convinced her wanting things was selfish. She learned he'd grown up poor in Seoul, built his empire through observation and patience, valued loyalty above everything. He spoke of security and logistics in ways that suggested complexity she didn't fully understand. What happened to that woman? He asked eventually. The one who could read people instantly? She married someone who needed her small. Nadia met his eyes, small enough that he felt big. Something passed between them, not desire, but recognition. Two people who understood what it meant to be underestimated. My legitimate businesses need someone who understands people, Jae-Seok said. Public relations, contract negotiations, reading clients, strategy. You'd be valuable. Interested? Nadia's instinct was refusal. She had no credentials anymore, no recent experience, no confidence. But another voice, older, fiercer, whispered, You were brilliant once. Maybe you still are. Why would you trust me? His smile was slight, knowing. I don't trust easily. But I recognize weapons when I see them. You've been a weapon pointed at yourself for years. Time to redirect. She accepted, partly for money and independence, partly because something in her, long dormant, was waking up. The work started immediately. Small projects testing her instincts. She was rusty but not broken. Her ability to read people, to find the emotional leverage in negotiations, to craft narratives. It was all still there, just buried. But doubt crept in through an unexpected source. Richard Chen, a business associate of Jae-Seok's, approached her at a company event. Charming, Western-educated, seemingly kind, he asked thoughtful questions, expressed concern about her situation, suggested gently that Jae-Seok might be using her talents for purposes she didn't fully understand. He's brilliant, Richard said carefully, but his world is complicated. I'd hate to see you caught in something dangerous. The seeds of doubt planted roots. Was she trading one controlling man for another? Was Jae-Seok's kindness manipulation by a more skilled player? Meanwhile, Ethan discovered Nadia was working for some Korean businessman. His narcissism couldn't tolerate her thriving without him. He tried to leverage the connection, showing up at Jae-Seok's corporate offices, claiming to represent his wife's interests, attempting to borrow money using her name and association. Massive mistake. Two men in black suits appeared at Ethan's office the next day. They didn't threaten, didn't touch him, just delivered a message in perfectly calm voices. Stop using her name. Final warning. Ethan, incapable of recognizing real power when it stared him down, responded the only way he knew how. He went public. Social media posts about his wife being corrupted by a criminal Korean businessman, calls to news outlets, threats to expose the dangerous man who'd stolen his wife. He didn't know that Kwon Jae-Seok was the most powerful Korean mafia boss in the city. He didn't know that threatening Nadia was threatening Jae-Seok's interests. He didn't know that some wars aren't won with violence, they're won with information, leverage, and patience. But he was about to learn. 2 weeks into working for Jae-Seok's corporate empire, Nadia closed a contract that had been stalled for 6 months. The client was a shipping conglomerate CEO notorious for backing out of deals. Nadia spent 3 hours reading him, his insecurities masked by aggression, his need to feel respected, the personal loss driving his business paranoia. She crafted her pitch around partnership rather than transaction, addressing fears he'd never articulated. He signed. Jae-Seok's team stared at her like she'd performed magic. The contract was worth $8 million. That evening, Jae-Seok took her to dinner at an exclusive restaurant where they didn't ask your name because they already knew who mattered. Private room overlooking the city, just the two of them for the first time without business as buffer. He poured wine with hands that had probably done terrible things but touched her world with unexpected gentleness. "You're not what I expected," he admitted. "What did you expect?" Nadia asked, emboldened by success in wine. "A victim to rescue, someone who needed saving." His dark eyes held hers. "But you're not that. You never were. You were just convinced you were." The space between them felt electric. His hand covered hers on the table, deliberate testing. Nadia's breath caught. This wasn't gratitude or safety. This was want, complicated and dangerous and real. They leaned closer. His eyes dropped to her lips. The kiss was inevitable, just centimeters away. Jae-Seok pulled back. "Not yet," he said quietly, though his hand remained on hers. "Not until you choose this knowing everything." Knowing what? Her voice came out breathless. He was silent for a long moment, something warring behind his eyes. Then, who I really am, what I really do. The revelation came in careful words. Kwon Jae-Seok wasn't just a businessman. He was the head of Korean mafia operations in the city, controlling territories, managing underground economies, commanding loyalty through fear and respect in equal measure. "You're a criminal," Nadia whispered, pulling her hand back. "I'm many things, some legal, some not." He didn't look away, didn't soften it. "But I'm honest about what I am. Your husband pretended to be good while destroying you. I'm dangerous, but I've never lied to you. Not once." Her mind reeled. The guards made sense now. The deference, the power that moved through rooms before he entered them. "The businesses you work for are completely legitimate," he continued. "My other operations are separate, insulated. You're not involved in anything illegal, but you deserve to know who's protecting you." "Why did you help me?" The question came out raw. "Someone once helped me when I was erased, when my father was murdered and I had nothing." His voice carried old pain. "I didn't help you to recruit you, Nadia. I helped you because I recognized what they'd done to you. But you did recruit me. For my legal empire, yes, because your mind is worth millions, and your husband tried to destroy it because he knew you'd surpass him if he didn't keep you small." A second revelation. "Richard Chen, the associate who warned you about me. He works for a rival organization. He's trying to steal you away. Not to save you, but to damage my operations by taking my most valuable strategist." Everything shifted. The doubt Richard had planted was manipulation. The kindness was recruitment. The warning was poison. Nadia had to choose. Walk away from everything, the work that made her feel alive, the man who'd shown her truth, the person she was becoming, or stay in a complicated, dangerous world where honesty came wrapped in violence. Before she could answer, the windows exploded. The blast threw them both backward. Jae-Seok's body covered hers instantly, shielding her from glass and fire. Car bomb in the street below, meant for him, nearly killing her. Chaos erupted. Guards flooded in. They were rushed to a private hospital, both bleeding from cuts but alive. In the sterile hospital room, bandaged and shaking, Nadia understood something fundamental. She didn't want to leave. Not because of him, because of herself. The woman she'd been before Ethan. The woman she was becoming now. Walking away meant surrendering that again, choosing safety over self. "I'm not leaving," she told Jae-Seok, whose arm was in a sling from shielding her. "Even knowing what I am," his voice was rough with emotion he rarely showed. "Especially knowing what you are. You've never lied to me, never pretended to be something you're not, never tried to make me smaller to feel bigger." She met his eyes. "That's more than anyone else ever gave me." The kiss happened then. Desperate, honest, dangerous, tasting like blood and truth and choice freely made. Neither of them knew that across the city, Ethan was meeting with a tabloid journalist, spreading documentation about Jae-Seok's criminal empire, planning to destroy them both. Publicly. The headline hit 24 hours later. Local woman leaves husband for Korean Mafia boss exclusive. Nadia's face was everywhere. Every news site, social media, morning shows. Ethan had given interviews painting himself as the concerned husband trying to save his wife from a dangerous criminal who'd brainwashed her. The media ate it alive. Jae-Seok's legitimate businesses faced immediate fallout. Investors demanded meetings. Board members questioned leadership. Contracts were put under review. The association with scandal threatened to unravel years of carefully constructed legitimacy. Worse, his rivals saw opportunity. Nadia became a target. Not just to Jae-Seok's heart, but to his empire. Hurting her would weaken him, make him vulnerable, distract him from business. In his world, love was liability. "You need to leave," Jae-Seok told her in his office, his voice controlled, but his eyes betraying devastation. "Go somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't reach you. This is my fault. I'm not running anymore." Nadia stood her ground. "You don't understand this world." The control cracked, frustration bleeding through. "I understand being treated like I'm disposable." She matched his intensity. "I understand being told what's best for me without being asked. This feels familiar, Jae-Seok." The comparison hit him like a physical blow. "I'm trying to protect you." "By controlling me? By deciding for me?" Her voice broke. "How is this different?" They stood on opposite sides of his desk, the chasm between protection and control yawning between them. He made the decision without her consent. Had her moved to a fortified safe house, guards posted at every entrance. For her safety, for her protection. Nadia was furious. Alone in the safe house, luxurious but locked, she spiraled. Different cage, different man, same loss of agency. Did she escape Ethan's control only to accept Jae-Seok's? Was this what love looked like in his world? Beautiful prisons and men who decided her fate? Meanwhile, Ethan was winning. Every interview painted him as the victim. Concerned husband, wronged man. The public ate it up. Powerful criminal stealing vulnerable woman made for compelling narrative. Jae-Seok's business partners demanded he cut ties with Nadia. "She's a liability," they said. "Not worth the exposure." Even some of his own men questioned the wisdom. "Boss, she's causing problems. Maybe it's time to—" "Finish that sentence and you're done," Jae-Seok said quietly, and they fell silent. But the pressure mounted. Then the attack came. Rival faction, seeing opportunity in chaos. They hit the safe house at 2 a.m. Professional, coordinated, meant to kidnap, not kill. Nadia was the leverage they needed. Jae-Seok's guards fought them off, but barely. Gunfire shattered the night. Nadia took a bullet grazed to her shoulder. Not life-threatening, but traumatic. Real. She was rushed to a private hospital, bleeding and shaking. Jae-Seok arrived looking destroyed. Suit disheveled, blood on his hands from carrying her, eyes wild with something that looked like fear. "This is what loving me costs," he said quietly, sitting beside her hospital bed. "I can't ask you to pay it." Nadia, medicated but lucid, understood the impossible position. "You're not asking. I'm choosing." She met his eyes. "But I'm not choosing to be locked away. I won't trade one cage for another, even if this one comes with good intentions. He didn't know how to protect her without controlling her. Years of wielding power through control made any other approach foreign. She didn't know how to be safe without surrendering the agency she'd just reclaimed. They were at an impasse neither knew how to cross. The media circus reached fever pitch when Ethan appeared at the hospital with news cameras. "I'm here to bring my wife home," he announced, playing the concerned husband for maximum sympathy. "She needs help, not a criminal holding her hostage." Security removed him, but the damage was done. Public opinion swayed further. Nadia looked like a victim being held against her will. Stockholm Syndrome, brainwashed by powerful criminal. The final blow. Federal authorities announced an investigation into Jae-Seok's operations. The publicity made them impossible to ignore. Everything was falling apart. In the hospital room, Nadia watched it crumble on the news. Jae-Seok stood at the window, shoulders rigid with the weight of impossible choices. "Maybe they're right," he said finally. "Maybe you should go back. File for divorce properly. Rebuild somewhere safe." "Is that what you want?" "What I want doesn't matter. Only what keeps you alive." Nadia understood then they were losing. Ethan was winning. And love, real, honest, dangerous love, was being destroyed by the very forces meant to protect it. Nadia stopped crying at 3 a.m. in her hospital room and started planning at 3:01. She'd spent hours feeling helpless, watching Ethan win, watching Jae-Seok struggle to protect her with the only tools he knew, control and distance. But lying in that hospital bed with a bandaged shoulder and a clear view of the problem, something clicked. She wasn't a victim needing rescue. She was a weapon that had forgotten how to fire. When Jae-Seok arrived at dawn, exhausted from coordinating security and damage control, he found Nadia sitting up with a laptop Miss Park had brought, making notes. "I need access to your PR team," she said without preamble, "and your legal advisors, and your media contacts. Nadia, you need rest. You want to protect me? Let me fight." Her voice carried the steel he'd first recognized in her. "I've been letting you handle this your way. Now we do it mine." Jae-Seok stared at her, recalibrating. "This isn't your fight. Everything about my life is my fight now." She met his eyes with the intensity of someone who'd found their footing. "You're brilliant at power and control. I'm brilliant at perception and narrative. Let me take the field." He studied her for a long moment, then pulled out his phone. "Tell me what you need." Nadia's old marketing instincts roared to life. She understood what Ethan was doing, controlling the narrative, playing victim, making her the villain. She knew how to read public opinion, manipulate perception, craft stories that resonated. She went public, but not the way Ethan expected. National morning show. Sympathetic interviewer. Nadia in simple, elegant clothes looking poised but genuine. She told her story not as a mafia boss's girlfriend, but as an abuse survivor who'd rebuilt herself. "My husband spent 7 years systematically erasing me," she said, her voice steady. "He controlled my finances, isolated me from friends, diminished every accomplishment until I believed I was worthless. When I finally left, he launched a public campaign to destroy me because I dared to become someone without his permission." She didn't deny Jae-Seok's complicated business interests. "I work for legitimate companies doing legitimate work. What Mr. Kwon does outside my employment isn't my business to confirm or deny. But he's never lied to me, never controlled me, never made me feel less than I am. That's more than I can say about my husband." Vulnerable but strong. Sympathetic but not victimized. Honest about complexity without apologizing for choices. Public opinion began shifting. Abuse survivors recognized her story. Women who'd escaped control saw themselves in her words. The narrative of criminal stealing wife became survivor escaping abuse. Meanwhile, Nadia dug deeper into Ethan's life with the resources Jae-Seok provided. What she found made her blood run cold and her strategy crystallize. Ethan had been embezzling from his company for 2 years, small amounts at first, then increasingly bold theft. He'd used her name and forged her signature on false documents, creating paper trails that made her complicit. That's why he'd wanted an open marriage. Not for freedom, for legal separation. If they divorced, she might discover the fraud. If they stayed married but separated, he could continue using her identity while she remained quiet and compliant. Her compliance was essential to his scheme. Her independence threatened everything. We don't fight him with violence, Nadia told Jae-Seok, spreading evidence across his desk. We fight him with truth, publicly, legally. Destroy him the way he tried to destroy me, by exposing exactly who he is. Jae-Seok looked at the evidence, then at her with something like awe. I've been protecting you wrong. You don't need a shield. You need a partner. They planned together. Not as protector and protected, but as equals bringing different weapons to the same war. Her public platform and strategic mind, his resources and connections, her understanding of narrative, his understanding of leverage. That night, alone in his penthouse, her choice to be there, not his demand, the kiss happened differently. Not desperate like before, not tentative, certain. Two people who'd found equal footing. After this, Jae-Seok promised, his forehead against hers, you choose everything. Stay, go, anything in between. But you choose. I already chose, Nadia said. Now let's end this. They set the trap carefully. A fake high-profile business meeting that Ethan couldn't resist crashing. His narcissism wouldn't allow Nadia to succeed without his interference. They'd bait him into public confession, record everything, hand him to authorities on a silver platter. Meanwhile, Jae-Seok handled the rival faction that had attacked. Not with violence, with information. Anonymous tips to federal authorities about their operations, their trafficking routes, their financial crimes. Let the system eliminate threats while keeping his own hands clean. Strategic. Surgical, using power differently than he ever had before. The stage was set, the trap was baited, and Nadia Brooks, once erased, now rebuilt, was ready to take back everything that had been stolen from her, including her own story. The Corporate Ethics Summit at the Grand Meridian Hotel was packed with business leaders, media, and industry influencers. Nadia stood backstage in a sharp navy suit that made her look like the executive she'd become, waiting for her cue. She was the keynote speaker on a panel about workplace abuse and financial control. The irony was perfect. Jae-Seok had made sure Ethan knew about it through carefully leaked information. They'd baited the trap with precision, knowing his narcissism wouldn't let him resist the chance to publicly reclaim his wife and destroy her credibility. Nadia took the stage to applause. She spoke about financial abuse tactics, controlling bank accounts, monitoring spending, creating dependence, about emotional control, isolation from friends, diminishment of accomplishments, systematic erosion of self-worth, about rebuilding after escape. She never named Ethan, didn't need to. Everyone knew. 15 minutes into her speech, exactly as predicted, Ethan burst through the main doors with a camera crew he'd hired. That's my wife, he shouted, his voice carrying across the stunned auditorium. I demand the right to respond to these lies. Security, Jae-Seok's people, strategically positioned, didn't remove him. They let him talk, let him dig. I supported you for 7 years. Ethan climbed onto the stage, playing to the cameras. I gave you everything. My money, my home, my name. And this is how you repay me? By lying and running to some criminal? Nadia remained calm, eerily calm. Your money? That's interesting. Tell everyone about your money, Ethan. I was the provider. I paid for everything while you contributed nothing. Is that why you forged my signature on documents embezzling from your company? She produced a folder from the podium. Is that why you've been using my identity to hide your financial fraud for 2 years? Ethan's face drained of color. You're lying. Montgomery Financial Services, $73,000 over 18 months, false expense reports with my forged signature. Nadia's voice was steady, devastating. Harbison Tech Consulting, $120,000, same pattern. You needed me quiet and compliant because my independence threatened to expose your crimes. The open marriage wasn't about freedom. It was about maintaining legal connection while creating distance, so you could keep using my name while I stayed under control. She turned to the audience, ignoring Ethan's sputtering. This is why abusers fight so hard when victims leave. Not because they love us, because we know their secrets, because our silence protects them, because our escape threatens their schemes. Federal agents entered through the side doors, perfectly timed, coordinated beforehand, with evidence Nadia and Jae-Seok had provided. Ethan Brooks, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and forgery. Ethan tried to run, tried to talk his way out, finally turned on Nadia with pure venom. You were nothing without me, a nobody from nowhere who needed me to matter. Nadia's response was quiet but carried to every corner of the auditorium. I was always something. You just needed me to be nothing. That was never about me. It was always about you. They led him away in handcuffs. His mistress Brittany, watching from the back, quietly disappeared. Rats and sinking ships. The media captured everything. The narrative was complete. Nadia was the survivor who'd escaped and exposed her abuser. Ethan was the criminal who'd hidden behind marriage while committing fraud. Simultaneously, across the city, federal raids hit the rival Mafia faction that had attacked Nadia. Anonymous tips, untraceable back to Jae-Seok, had provided locations, evidence, everything authorities needed. The threat was eliminated without Jae-Seok firing a single shot or giving a single order that could be proven. Clean, strategic, brilliant. His own operations remained untouched, carefully insulated, never provable. The public saw him as a legitimate businessman with complicated connections, nothing more. 3 days later, divorce papers arrived at Jae-Seok's office. Not the open marriage mockery Ethan had proposed, full dissolution. He'd signed from jail, desperate to separate himself from Nadia now that she was legally toxic to him. Her name on documents meant federal scrutiny he couldn't afford. Nadia signed without hesitation, without tears, without regret. 7 years ended with a signature that felt like liberation. Jae-Seok found her on his penthouse balcony at sunset, watching the city lights begin to glow. "What now?" he asked quietly. Nadia turned to him, this dangerous man who'd never lied to her, never diminished her, never needed her small to feel powerful. She smiled. "Now I choose everything, starting with you." 6 months later, Nadia Brooks sat in the executive suite of Kwon Enterprises, reviewing quarterly reports with the confidence of someone who'd earned every inch of her position. Chief Operating Officer. Not a vanity title. Not girlfriend playing businesswoman. Actual executive authority with commensurate salary, equity stake, and board voting rights. She'd rebuilt the company's public relations infrastructure, closed deals worth tens of millions, and commanded respect from people who'd initially dismissed her as the boss's romantic interest. They'd learned quickly. Nadia Brooks was sharp, strategic, and absolutely ruthless when business required it. "The Singapore contract needs revision," she told Jae-Seok, sliding annotated documents across his desk. They were in his penthouse office, late afternoon sun casting golden light across marble and glass. "Their terms are predatory. Counter with these." He reviewed her notes, nodded. "Agreed. Send it." Equals, partners, in business and everything else. Their romantic relationship remained carefully private, not hidden, but not performed for public consumption. Professionally, they were executive and COO. Personally, they were something more complicated and more real than either had expected. Nadia maintained her own apartment in a building Jae-Seok owned, symbolically important to her. She stayed with him most nights by choice, not obligation. He never questioned it, understanding her need for autonomy, for the freedom to leave, even if she never intended to. Some of her old friends had reached out after the trial, apologizing for abandoning her when Ethan isolated her. Nadia was gracious but boundaried. "I'm not who I was. We'll see who we are now." Some relationships rebuilt, others didn't. She was okay with both outcomes. That evening, they attended the annual Women in Business Gala. Nadia was the keynote speaker on financial abuse and economic recovery, a platform she'd built intentionally, using her story to help others recognize and escape control. She stood at the podium in an elegant emerald gown, looking every inch the powerful woman she'd become. Jae-Seok watched from the audience, pride evident in his usually controlled expression. "My husband once asked me for an open marriage," Nadia told the silent ballroom. "He presented it as freedom, but it was really permission. Permission to continue hurting me while I smiled and accepted it. When I refused, when I walked out with nothing but my phone and my dignity, I thought I was choosing destruction." She paused, letting the moment breathe. "Instead, I opened a door and walked into the life I was meant for. I remembered who I was before someone convinced me I was nothing. I rebuilt skills I'd forgotten I had. I learned that love doesn't require you to shrink. Real love, dangerous love, powerful love, it amplifies who you are. It doesn't diminish you." She didn't mention Jae-Seok by name. Their relationship was theirs, private, complicated, real in ways public narratives could never capture. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Afterward, in the car heading home, Jae-Seok took her hand. Regret anything? Nadia considered the question honestly. Only the years I wasted being small. Everything else, even the painful parts, brought me here. You were never small. His voice was quiet, certain. Just buried. I'm glad you dug yourself out. We, she corrected, squeezing his hand. I'm glad we dug me out. I couldn't have done it alone. You could have, he said, but I'm grateful you didn't. They walked into his building together. Two people who'd found power not in control, but in partnership. Not in domination, but in mutual respect. Not in making the other smaller, but in witnessing each other's full, complicated, dangerous humanity. Nadia had learned the most important lesson. Love isn't about completing each other. It's about not diminishing each other. It's about standing beside someone who sees your strength and chooses not to break it, who sees your vulnerability and chooses not to exploit it, who sees your potential and chooses to help you reach it. That's the most dangerous, beautiful thing in the world. Not the fairy tale. The real thing. The love that sets you free instead of locking you down. The love that makes you more, not less. Nadia Brooks had walked out of one marriage with nothing. She'd walked into something else entirely. Not just a relationship, but herself. Whole, powerful, free. And that was worth everything.